and welcome to this pop-up video special emergency bannings edition. Note, they weren't emergency bannings, but this is an emergency edition of pop-up video because of the bannings. I'm Dan.
I am Max.
And we are here to talk to you about the bannings that have rocked Pauper.
Yeah, seriously.
Just shattered the format.
Yeah, it's something else, to be sure.
It is definitely not what I thought they were going to do, and blows the format way wider open than I thought they were going to try to do.
Absolutely.
At least in theory. Who knows if the Delver decks will actually get kicked off the top, but I think Blue-Black Delver's getting kicked off the top.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar and you're like, what in the world are you guys talking about?
What the horse shit is this?
Yeah.
This isn't gameplay.
Pauper did receive 3 very large bans to the format, 3 free spells that you could formally cast in the form of Gush, in the form of Gitaxian Probe, and in the form of Daze. So, pretty significant. And if you listen to the last episode of Paup-up video where we featured Is It Blitz, we talked a whole bunch. Well, I blathered, because that's what I do on those, a whole bunch about specifically if the bannings were something that were needed, and if so, how should they go about calibrating the bans. My opinion was their second option that they list in the banned and restricted announcement, which was cantrips, and the really good cantrips. I think that would have been the way I would have looked. I'm assuming they've done their due diligence. They know the stats, and they have statistics. They obviously noted Blue-Black Delver having a 55% win rate on Magic Online, which is insane.
I was going to let you say your piece, but how dare you bring up Is It Blitz at a time like this?
Well, it was the last video we did.
I know, but how dare you?
And
the grave isn't even cold yet, sir.
I know, but you know, that's the thing, right? If you go for this free banning package, you're going to hit the combo decks of the format. Obviously, predominantly Is It Blitz and Tireless Tribe. If you go the direction I thought they would, or I was hoping they would go, which was more of the very strong cantrips like Ponder and Preordain, then everything kind of gets shaken up and we just get a less good version of all those cards, immediately replacing it in the form of like Serum Visions and Sleight of Hand. So I think it significantly impacts those combo decks a lot less as well, while still making them a little less consistent than they were.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that the combo decks in this route take a bigger hit, though I have already seen talk in different groups about potentially trying Is It Blitz with things like Manamorphose and a couple of the other spells that are quote-unquote free spells that they haven't really utilized yet.
We all just go, okay, what's the next slightly worse cantrip? Let's try that one.
Right. And I mean, I think there's going to be a Spell Slinger style combo deck, a critical mass deck, if you will, at some point or another. You can't keep a good guy down. Those decks are just very consistent at what they do. And generally, all the ones that do something small do it cheap at common. So you got some stuff. You know, you got a couple little surprises coming out of Modern Horizons still, probably.
Sure, I'm sure we'll see some interesting stuff out of Horizons. And as one of the Is It Blitz players, you can't really keep us down. We a lot of us came over from Familiars when they banned that deck from Orbit, and I don't want to see them ban this deck from Orbit too, and I don't think they will.
No, I
think
think
this is probably as far as we're going.
And I think this is the most damage they could reasonably do to that deck, unless this deck somehow accrued a giant win percentage and they were specifically targeting it, like they did with Familiars.
Yeah, unless you're targeting the engines of the deck specifically and not just the most powerful, seemingly most powerful free spells in the format. I'm going to take this chance to dovetail right into the main point I want to talk about in this entire video, which is the results of the largest or the most important Pauper tournament ever held, the Pauper MCQ from Grand Prix Los Angeles,
right,
wherein one deck in the entire top 8 was playing at least 2 of those spells. William Yoder's Dimir Delver deck had 3 Gush and 4 Daze. The only other deck in the top 8 of that event, again, the most important deck ever to feature this format, In fact, no, that was the only deck that had any of those cards in it.
Wow, Familiars wasn't running any Gush or anything?
Did I... Familiars... Oh, no, that's Familiars... No, it wasn't. Familiars is running Preordained Ponder, Kurtar's Desire, Deep Analysis, Snap, and Ghostly Flicker.
Okay.
So, yeah. So, Dimir Delver was the only deck in that entire top 8, which was comprised of Familiars, Dimir Delver, Bogles, Zombies, Burn, Oops All Instance, Tortex, and Tron.
Yep.
Oops All Instance wasn't even running any of those.
I think
Oops All Instance was running Repulse, AK, Counterspell, Exclude, Think Twice, Condescend, and Force Spike.
That brings up a great point, too, about kind of where's the metagame shift from here.
Mm-hmm.
I think Boros Monarch gets a lot better.
Oh, yeah.
I think, and same with the White-Black Pestilence deck, which is a very similar Monarchy-style deck. And if you've read the Banner Restricted announcement, Ian Duke does mention them keeping an eye on Monarch.
I just love how, I'm gonna bloviate for a while because I'm still salty they banned my favorite deck, but the fact that they're paying this much attention says something.
Yeah, it's really cool that they are actually looking at statistics, paying attention, trying to make the format robust. We always said for the longest time, especially when we were first really getting into Pauper, that they're fools for not taking the format more seriously, and now they see they are is great because it's such a low barrier to entry for somebody who wants to play Magic.
Yeah, I really think the only reason that they've never paid more serious attention to the format is the reason that a lot of people have brought up is that it doesn't sell packs.
Right. But it's just, oh man, it's great. Like when any deck you can build for around $40 to $60, barring an exception here or there, it's just really good for people to be like, especially if you get into Magic, maybe you play an FNM here or there, right? And you have like your standard deck. It's a great format to branch out for because you're spending less than your standard deck and you're able to play and make really high level eternal like Magic style decisions. So it's great.
Yeah, like just looking at the last league, Rainbowtron $64, White Black Pestilence $55, Blue Black Delver $90, Burn $63, UB is $50, Mono White $26, Inside Out Combo $87, Blue Red Control $125, and Mono Blue Delver $90. So the most expensive deck there. Now I'm going to flip over to the decks in Standard, and we're going to go for the last competitive Standard League. You have Bug $390, Green Black Rock $175, Gruul Midrange $260, Azurius Aggro $198, Bant Nexus $618. And I could continue, but the cheapest one on that list $175.
Yeah, that's wild.
Mm-hmm.
And so we're not here to fillet how great Paup-up is. We have a whole series of Pauper videos that talk about that.
Mm-hmm.
But it just is really a nice change of pace to see how seriously R&D and everyone who handles this are really looking at Pauper as a format, and it's heartening to be sure.
Come on, 2020 Pauper constructed decks and the acknowledgement of the banned list in paper.
That would be pretty interesting.
You just ban every card that isn't available as a common on Moto and call it good.
Pretty much. We don't need to get into Hymn to Torok and Sinkhole nonsense.
Yeah, exactly. I don't need that, and my other wacky formats right now are having wacky formats of choice are having a hard enough time deciding on what's legal and what isn't. Looking at you, old school. So, I don't need to worry about that with Pauper.
Right, and I think from here we're going to see a shift of the metagame kind of getting more towards Boros Monarch. I think, Elves kind of becomes a predominant force in the world of combo decks.
That's going to be the deck I'm going to pick up after losing my pet deck.
Yeah, I think that's a good choice. I think, obviously, the Pestilence style black-white deck's really good. I think Tron's going to be the early forerunner for best deck in the format. Because I just don't think it's close. We still have Delver. If you're a Delver player like me, don't be afraid. We still have our Delvers. My Scred Delver deck, my Izzet Delver deck, lost 2 Gushes out of the main board and nothing out of the sideboard. So, no harm, no foul there. We just play a couple spells that are a little bit worse than Gush, and that's not a big deal, and that's obviously Not saying a lot because Gush, one of the most powerful cards in the format. Like you said yesterday, and I talked to a couple other of our friends about this, I think, and everybody echoed your sentiments, is that natively free spells are a problem in any format that you can play them.
Yes.
And Pauper's no exception. I mean, when you can play something for free, or like some of the other more powerful cards in the format are like Palace Sentinels that cost 4, or Thorn of the Black Rose that costs 4. Mm-hmm. The difference between 0 mana and 4 mana, well, it's 4. I get that, but it's more than that when you're playing the game. Way more than that.
Mm-hmm.
So I can totally understand the choice. Like I said, I would have rather seen something else shift, just so not specific archetypes took such a hit. But I can understand where they were coming from with this ban, and I think overall it's a good thing, because for a long time, if you play a lot of Pauper, it's impossible not to see that blue is just, like in a lot of Eternal formats, blue is just far and away the best color.
Yeah.
So I think...
looking at the top of the metagame, Burn, Blue-Black Delver, Blue-Red Control, Red-White Weenie, Rainbow-tron, which is heavy blue. In the top, so the top 8 decks, that's 5.
Yeah, it's a lot.
And then if you continue it on, you have Kodotha-Boros, Bogles, White-Black Pestilence, and Inside-Out combo.
Yep.
Which makes 6 of the top 12 decks that feature heavy blue.
Yeah.
That's half.
Yeah, half of all the choices are predominantly blue-based decks. Yeah. It needs to get taken down a bit of a peg. It's Pauper, right? And I know some people are bemoaning, like, oh my god, my foil gushes and all this crap, but...
There's a guy in one of the Facebook groups I'm in yesterday who posted 4 foil get probes and 4 foil gushes like 25 minutes before the banning.
Jeez.
I felt so bad for him because the comments were just lol, okay, nice dump. I just can't believe there's no format where you can play 4 gushes anymore.
I know. I mean, that was really, I think part of the reason I was holding on so hard to Gush as not being banned was because Pauper was the only format you could play 4 gushes.
Well, I guess you can play it in middle school too. But
that's true.
That's not a WotC sponsored format, but you can
not.
play 4 gush you can play 4 gush in middle school.
Yeah, so I mean that was a pretty neat drawing point to the format for me.
The only format you can still play 4 gushes.
Yeah, I mean that was really an interesting point of like, oh, if you just think this is limited with slightly better stuff, you're insane.
Yeah. You've never seen a game of Pauper like 2 competitive or 2 competent decks played.
Right, exactly. So, I mean, I'm excited for the shift. I mean, I'm always excited because I love building decks and I love when the metagame gets shaken up like this. I don't think it's going to upset the balance of the format. I think combo is still very playable. I think control is obviously going to be one of the better standouts of the format. I still think Pauper needs a lot of help in terms of aggro, but yeah. I mean, like, it depends on where you place Burn in that layout. If, like, you consider, like P. Sully does, Burn's a combo deck, or do you consider it, it's not really an aggro deck because it's not trying to really aggro. I guess to an extent you're trying to hit with your get 2 lava runners and tap your Thermo Alchemists, but...
Thermo Alchemist.
The
most Irish Thermo Alchemist. Burn is a combo deck.
I feel
because if you don't have the right assemblage of cards, you cannot win the game.
Yep.
And I've also played a lot of combo decks in my time. And so the thing is, Burn in like Modern is on the border, right? Because you can play a lot of creatures. Burn in Legacy and in Pauper is a combo deck because most of the Pauper Burn decks are running 8 creatures.
Mm-hmm.
Lava Runners and Thermo Alchemists.
That's right.
And so you're not doing anything other than just casting enough spells to make sure your opponent has no life total left.
I agree.
And that's a combo deck.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think the format still needs an aggro deck. Maybe Stompy sees a bit of a resurgence after these bans. It's possible. It's hard to say, but I mean, Delver's kind of the aggro deck of the format, being like a tempo deck. And like I said, I have no doubt that Mono Blue Delver and Izzet Delver are going to be here to stay. It's inevitable. They're both very good, and the packages that they use, like the fairies and ninja packages and things like that, are still as solid as they ever were in the format. So no big deal. I think it just pulls a little bit of the inbreeding out of the format where you're specifically boarding certain cards for certain flavors of Delver, and I'm always a little upset when there's like 5 Delver decks, but there's a version of every other deck.
Mm-hmm.
Like we had 3 distinct Delver decks, and then the next closest was 2 Boros decks,
Mm-hmm.
and that's basically it.
Yeah, pretty much.
The only things that had like multiple versions of a deck, like I guess you could argue Teachings and Blue-Black Control. Yeah, okay, kind of.
Yeah.
But we'll still get Tortured Existence for mid-range. We still have Familiars hanging out. I mean, we have a lot. There's still a ton of viable deck options. I think that number only goes up. And I think sideboards get to flex a little bit more. I think overall it'll be a healthy choice. Just, like I said, I would have rather gone down the angle of weakening our cantrips in blue instead of just murdering our free spells. But again, can totally see where they're coming from with that angle. And if you feel differently or you feel the same, let us know in the comments, of course. We love to know what you're thinking. This is definitely a discussion topic, more so than it is us just talking to each other. So let us know what you think down below. That's important to us. I'm not just saying that because it's a YouTube video and everybody who posts a YouTube video says that.
Just tell us we're wrong if you think we're wrong.
Yeah, where should they have gone? Should they go down the cantrip angle? Like I said, should they have not touched the format? I know there's been a lot of outspoken people saying that the format was fine. I know there's a lot of people who equally were
Those
allowed.
were people who were playing Delver.
Yeah, or is it Blitz, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I don't even think a lot of us thought the format was fine. Because the thing is, the decks that have given me the hardest time when playing Is It Blitz are Burn, which unfortunately didn't get touched here, but that's fine, because what do? You're going to ban Lightning Bolt? I don't think so.
They banned Taxian Probe.
Fair. They did ban the only card draw spell the deck has, other than Cycling Forgotten Cave.
Right.
But, so, Burn and Delver were the only trouble I ever really had with that deck. You know, I lost to bad mana and whatever else, but the only real trouble I ever had were Burn and Delver.
Right.
Does anything come out of the woodwork now that we didn't know before?
Yeah, I would. Oh, that'd be sweet.
Yeah. Give me new Pauper decks. Like, I'm totally down for new Pauper decks. I'm down for more stuff like Oops All Instants and Zombies, right?
Right.
Like,
Affinity.
Decks that didn't really, well, I'm just talking about decks that didn't really exist before that suddenly came out of nowhere at the most important Pauper tournament ever held and just made,
There's so much room for the format to grow, so I'm excited for people to brew. I'm excited to see what we get from Modern Horizons and those future style sets. It'll be neat. I mean, it's all upside from here. It's going to take a little bit of groundwork, but if they use Modern as example, showing that they don't mind banning and unbanning, as long as it's not just it's banned forever, shut up, we don't talk about it anymore, I'll be happy to see a format that can be evergreen and constantly changing.
I agree with you completely. Which I think is probably a good place to call this guy to a close. If you like what you're hearing here and seeing here, well, you can check us out at www.superliminalfilms.com. We are also on Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye.